Every single day, roughly 50 to 70 billion of your own cells receive an internal signal to shut down and destroy themselves. Your body isn't fighting this, your body is ordering it. This process is called apoptosis, and it wasn't formally named until surprisingly recently. In 1972, pathologists John Kerr, Andrew Wyllie, and Alistair Currie published a paper describing a distinct pattern of cell death they'd observed under the microscope. One that looked nothing like the messy, damage-driven death caused by injury or infection. They coined the term apoptosis, borrowing a Greek word originally used to describe leaves falling from a tree, precisely because the process looked deliberate and orderly rather than destructive. Their observation reshaped how biologists understood cell death entirely. It wasn't simply something that happened to cells. In most cases, it was something cells actively did to themselves, on a schedule, by design. Here's the distinction that made their discovery so significant. When a cell dies from damage, it ruptures messily, spilling its contents and triggering inflammation in the surrounding tissue. Apoptosis is the opposite. The cell shrinks, methodically breaks itself down into small, neatly packaged fragments, and gets quietly cleared away by nearby immune cells, with no mess, no inflammation, and no disruption to the tissue around it. It's less like an explosion and more like a controlled demolition, scheduled, deliberate, and clean. The scale of this is difficult to fully grasp. Estimates from cell biology research suggest that an adult human body loses tens of billions of cells through this process daily, cycling through a significant fraction of your entire cellular population over the course of a year. This isn't a rare event happening occasionally somewhere in your body. It's constant, ongoing, and essential to staying alive, running in the background at every moment, whether you're asleep, awake, sick, or perfectly healthy. Here's why your body does this on purpose. Cells receive a constant stream of internal and external signals that determine whether they should keep functioning or be marked for removal. A cell might be flagged for apoptosis because it's old and no longer functioning efficiently, because it's slightly damaged in a way that could become dangerous if left alone, because it's no longer needed in that specific location, or because it shows early signs of mutation that, left unchecked, could eventually develop into cancer. In each of these cases, apoptosis acts as a built-in quality control system, removing individual cells before they can cause a larger problem for the body as a whole. This process is also how your body sculpts itself during development, long before you were ever born. During early fetal development, human hands begin as a solid paddle-like shape, and the individual fingers only become separated because the cells in the spaces between them are deliberately triggered to undergo apoptosis and die off, carving out the gaps that eventually become distinct fingers. Without this precisely timed wave of programmed cell death, human hands would remain fused together in a mitten-like shape. In a very real sense, apoptosis is one of the reasons you have a recognizably human body at all, not despite cells dying, but specifically because of it. There's a useful way to think about what this actually means for you, day to day. The Ship of Theseus is an old philosophical puzzle. If you replace every plank of a ship, one at a time, is it still the same ship? Most people who've encountered that puzzle imagine a slow, passive process, boards simply wearing out and getting swapped over time. Apoptosis tells a very different version of that story. It's not that the old planks quietly rot and eventually get replaced. It's that the ship is actively, deliberately pulling out planks itself on purpose the moment they're judged to be a liability, whether or not they look damaged from the outside, and doing so roughly 50 to 70 billion times a day. You're not a ship slowly falling apart and being patched. You're a ship that employs its own demolition crew, working around the clock, tearing out anything flagged as a risk before it can spread. Here's where it gets stranger, and where the real stakes of this system become clear. Apoptosis is one of your body's primary defenses against cancer. When a cell's DNA becomes damaged in a way that could lead to uncontrolled growth, one of the first responses in a healthy cell is to trigger its own apoptosis before that damage can be passed on or allowed to multiply. Cancer researchers have identified that one of the defining features of cancer cells is precisely that they've somehow evaded this system either by disabling the internal signals that would normally trigger apoptosis, or by developing resistance to the process entirely. A cancer cell isn't simply a cell that grows too fast. In many documented cases, it's a cell that has specifically lost the ability to die when it's supposed to. This reframes something significant. The 50 to 70 billion cellular deaths happening in your body today aren't a sign that something is going wrong. They're one of the clearest signs that something is going right. Every one of those controlled, quiet deaths is a small act of protection, an old or damaged or potentially dangerous cell removing itself from the picture before it can cause harm, billions of times every single day, almost entirely without your awareness. If you watched our earlier video on how your body is rebuilt from scratch roughly every 10 years, this is the other half of that same story. Cellular turnover explains how you're replaced. Apoptosis explains why the old version has to go in the first place, and it explains it with far more urgency than simple wear and tear. Cells aren't just fading out gradually because they're worn down. In most cases, they're being actively, deliberately shut down on a schedule by a system built specifically to catch problems before they become dangerous. You didn't just die once over the span of a decade, atom by atom, the way we described before. You're dying constantly, right now, in the most literal biological sense available, tens of billions of times today alone. And every single one of those small, controlled deaths is a large part of the reason you're still here to watch this.